All right, so the first 3 chapters are Ezekiel's call. Ezekiel's call. Then beginning in chapter 4 and going through chapter 24, you have judgment against Judah. So he starts with the people back in Judah. Now, he's not in Judah, right? He's in Tel Aviv. He's in Babylon. But he's preaching about the people back in Judah. But he's also preaching to the people that he's living among, because they haven't repented yet either, at least many of them. So they're getting a dose of it. But the judgment is against Judah, and they're going to fall. You know, God's going to bring Nebuchadnezzar back one more time and destroy them. So judgment against Judah, that's chapters 4 through 24. Now, between chapter 24 and chapter 25, Jerusalem is destroyed. That's an important note to make because it changes the tone of the book. Now, we know that because the report comes. It takes over a year for the report to get back, but 33:21, news arrives from Jerusalem that Jerusalem has fallen. Now, if you watch the Bible Project video, they have a good illustration of this when the guy shows up and he looks like he's had it rough, you know. So he represents being a fugitive from Jerusalem coming to Babylon captivity. So it happens between 24 and 25, but the news doesn't get reported to chapter 33 to everybody else. But of course, God revealed it to Ezekiel the day it was happening. Meanwhile, back in Jerusalem, Nebuchadnezzar just attacked. That's what you have here. So anyway, Jerusalem destroyed between 24 and 25. This is the central point of the book, and everything before this is warning. That's the gloom and doom I mentioned earlier. Everything after this is consolation. He's encouraging them. Well, God has done what he said he was going to do, but don't be overly in despair, because God is going to restore Jerusalem. He is going to rebuild the temple. He is going to send us home. It's not the end of the world. We're going to get to go back. So that's encouragement. Now, it may seem, this may seem incongruous to that message of consolation, because the next section, which is 25 through 32, judgment against the pagan neighbors. You say, well, I thought it was consolation, but it's judgment still. Yeah, but it was consolation to Judah, because these were their neighbors that had been persecuting them and that had been laughing at them and that had, we would say, taken snipe shots at them because they had an opportunity when they were being attacked by somebody else to encroach on their property and things like that. So this would be encouraging to the people of Judah to hear that God also is judging Egypt and Tyre and the Philistines and Edom and Ammon and Moab, all those different nations. So I'm trying to stay on the green so we don't get into too much detail, but let me give you this. There are no prophecies against Babylon. Well, first, that's not a neighbor, because that's a long distance. But second, there are some judgments against distant nations, but Babylon is not included. That's a matter of speculation as to why, but that's where they are, you know. So he doesn't have a burden against, as Isaiah would say, or a prophecy, set your face against passage against Babylon. Now, the dates, this section covers about a year. So you got 587 to 586. Then beginning in 33, you have the last Well, let's go 33 through 39. I used to group all this together, but I decided that you need to have a break between 39 and 40. So that's the way I'm going to teach it this time. Sometimes all that's grouped together in the commentaries, and you can do it that way if you want to, but it seems to be it makes more sense to add a break between 39. So we're going to do 33 through 39, and this is Israel's redemption and return. It covers 15 years from 586 to 571. I forgot to give you these 7 years, so I'm sorry about that. This section, 4 through 24, covers 7 years. From 593, that's when Ezekiel began prophesying, to 588. And this is going to pick up at 587. So it's consecutive. So from 593 to 588. And a key idea in this section is the Lord is not here. We're going to have a whole 3 chapters, 2 or 3 chapters, where God moves out of his own house. He moves out of the temple. And it's very dramatic. He moves to the threshold, and then he moves to the eastern gate, and then he moves to the mountain across, looking back. So he's escorted by angels. It's very dramatic. God's moving out of his house because you're such sinners, because God's not going to be home when he sends Nebuchadnezzar to burn it down. So God moved out. Now, so God is not here in this section. But when you get to the last part of the book, the last verse of the book of Ezekiel closes with these words: the Lord is there. So he's back. And really, when you think about the Lord moving out, where did he go? He went to Babylon. He went to his people. Because he always wanted, we're going to see that when we go through the book, God always wanted companionship or communion or fellowship with his people. So he moves out of here because his people aren't there anymore. The ones that are still there, they're in rebellion. So the ones that are righteous, as few as they are, they're in Babylon. And then eventually at the end of the book, you're going to have this vision of the restoration of the temple at the end. And God is going to come back to Jerusalem from what direction? From Babylon's direction. He's going to come from the east. And he's going to move back into his temple at the end of the book. So you've got God is not there because he moved out. And then God is there because he moved back after the 70 years. Now, that gets us through this section. So the last section, chapters 40 through 48, is reconstruction of the temple, which is a prophecy of the church. The reconstruction of the temple, which literally occurred, of course, but that prophecy is about more than just going home and rebuilding the temple. That prophecy is about God's big plan. God's big plan is to have a spiritual temple, which is the church. And we'll talk about that when we get to that section, of course. All right, so I said that was the simple part. We covered a lot of detail even in that. But I will just give you the others. There's no new material. It's the same book, of course, but it's just different perspectives on the same chapters. And I color-coded these so they're easier to follow from one level to the other. So the blue, I'm not a real big fan of alliteration. That's a big joke with my Memphis students. But a lot of them are, and you may be, and that's fine. I just think it's overused. So if you are, just vary up your approach and don't always use the same approach, because that gets old to people who hear you all the time. But either way, this is an alliterated outline of the book, if you like that. And it is easier to remember, of course. Alliteration is a memory tool. So the first 3 chapters are fantastic visions. And when we get to chapter 1, it is definitely going to be fantastic visions. Then the second section is the fate of Judah before the siege. Because Ezekiel is telling them, there's no hope. You've gone too far. God is going to carry you in captivity. That's your fate. Then the next section, beginning in 25, the foes of Judah, and this is during the siege. So Jerusalem was sieged, which means, you can't take Jerusalem straight on because it's on top of a mountain and it's got a great wall around it with good gates. I don't think any nation has ever taken Jerusalem without a siege. Well, maybe the Greeks did when they came in on the Sabbath day. I don't know, but it's very hard to do. And even the walls, you can't break them down. You got to starve the people out, right? Yeah, Michael.
I saw. We're actually at Lawrenceville. We're studying the Book of Nehemiah right now, and I found some literature that I don't think people realize just what kind of walls these were. These were walls like any other kingdom of that time. They were 8 feet thick.
Wow.
39 feet high. And there was 2.9 miles of them.
Wow.
So
that's impressive.
Yeah, that's formidable.
It is. And that's why they always ended up being sieged. Even in AD 70, you had the strongest army in the world, the Romans, with the most modern technology at that time, and they just had to starve them out, So that's what you had here with Nebuchadnezzar also. But eventually they were starved out and they were carried away. But at that same time, while he was in the neighborhood, he also attacked all the other. Tyre is right there. Zidon is right there. The Philistines, Moab, Ammon. So he just conquered the whole bunch of them while he's down there. So that's during the siege period. Then the last section, well, that is the last section.